A very good morning to all of you. Uh, Once again, I warmly welcome all of you for joining this today's webinar on COVID-19 and agriculture issue and policy. I request all the participants once again to mute their mic and switch off their camera. Myself, Bhupesh Chintamani, I am a PhD scholar at Gokhale Institute. Now I would like to invite Professor Rajesh Parche, Director of our institute, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, for opening remarks. Sir, now it's over to you.
Good morning, Bhupesh. Thank you very much, Bhupesh and Pranav, for starting this new initiative of webinars. The topic that both of you have chosen, that is COVID and the economic situation in the country, is a really topical issue, very, very contemporary. And I'm sure a number of all our participants who have joined us today would be looking forward to this program. And you have also selected, and they have very kindly agreed to come and to contribute to your webinars. All of the panel of experts that you have invited have been very kind enough to accede to your request and to join you. Now, my work, of course, is very brief, and I have to give you a brief overview of some developments in the Indian economy and the Indian polity, which have been taking place in the last 4 or 5 years. Many of them have, I would say, cumulative negative repercussions on our economy. I am talking of the period from 2015 to 2020. If you observe the industrial growth rate during this last 5 years, there has been a continuous decline in the Indian industrial growth rate right from 2015 till today. Now, while the industrial growth rate was going down, there were a number of people, meaning a very few people, who were constantly warning the government of this decline in the industrial growth rate, and that something has got to be done about the recession which is developing in the Indian economy. But the euphoria of the new government and the earlier avatar of the new government was such that almost no attention was being paid to the economy and to the developments in the economy. The thinking, I think, was that these are very natural phases. Recessions will come, booms will come, recessions will go, booms will go, and nothing needs to be done at the level of the policy for any kind of active government intervention. Now, all this took a very ugly turn in 2019-2020 with the advent of COVID-19. COVID-19 meant a total lockdown on the economy. Already the economy was undergoing a continuous decline in the growth rate, and the industrial growth rate had come down to something like 3%. Now the projection for the next year is alarming, and the projection is that the industrial growth rate could go down to -5%, right? We don't know. We have to wait. 6 months of this year are still to go by. But it seems very, very certain to me that the corona problem is going to be with us for another 3 to 6 months at least, which means that practically the whole year will go in tackling the corona problem. The Prime Minister is, of course, there have been other problems along with the decline in the industrial growth rate. Obviously, banking assets, non-performing assets have also gone up. So good part of our budget and so on has been devoted towards recapitalization of banks, and now in the Prime Minister's package, 20 lakh crores package, 3 lakh crores is the loan guarantee to be given to the SME sector and so on and so forth. So the financial sector is also in a very poor condition along with the real sector. And add to that the coronavirus problem. With the coronavirus problem is another very major negative development. and that is the development on our borders. Ever since Article 370 and Section 335A had been abrogated, and very rightly so, uh, there has been a fear in Pakistan, and also a very right-minded fear, that something India is going to do in order to reclaim POK. Now, the area of POK is politically sensitive in the sense not only Pakistan is involved, the Chinese economic corridor to the Arabian Sea is also through the same region. China and Pakistan are, of course, allies, and they are enemies of India, traditional enemies of India, both of them having border problems with India. Now, the immense amount of investments which China has made in building that economic corridor and in generally giving aid to Pakistan, China is worried that that investment will go dead, it will go bad if India occupies POK and claims it. Now, that being China's fear, China has also reacted, and on Aksai Chin border area, which is also in dispute with China, they have started taking some action. So, on the political development, also international political development, this is another negative which has developed. So, I would say presently India has been challenged by three negatives. One is the continuing recession, second is the corona problem, and third is the border problem with China and Pakistan. I'm not going to propose any solutions in this. I'm sure the experts will come. They'll have a lot to say on this question. And of course, all of you will be free to interact with them and ask them. I'll just say only one thing. It's not always good to be confronted by a host of problems. Three problems at a time is not a good idea to be faced with. So one after another, at least the first two problems should be solved. The first problem, which is easy to solve, which can be readily solved, is the problem of the recession. And here I find that the Prime Minister's package is not really as effective as it could have been. First of all, many items in the package, and I'm sure Dr. Ashish Kulkarni will cover this in his presentation. Many items of the package are simply not new items, they are repackaged old items. So you don't see anything in the package except something like 4,000 to 5,000 crores, which can constitute a new stimulus to the economy. By my reckoning, by my calculation, the size of the stimulus needed in the economy is somewhere in the region of 20 to 30,000 crores. Just see what has been done in Europe and USA. 85% of the wage bill of companies, small, medium, large, has been picked up by the government for the last 4 or 5 months. 85% of the total wage bill. That's putting a lot of money in the hand of people. That has been done in India. So if we have to get out of recession and stagnation, I think the first thing to do would be a massive dose of deficit financing and massive placing of orders with our industries by the government, so that at least on the economic side, we are completely insulated. Number one, government is going to need the tax revenue. Government is going to have to borrow if we have to go to war. So it's always good to have a lot of resources with the government if this is to happen. At the same time, to fight corona also for the next, we don't know when a cure for corona is going to be found, and if at all it is not found in the next 6 months, then the problem of corona is going to continue, which means, of course, social distancing, which means webinars and things like this. But that still means a decline in the economic activity. So the second problem, of course, to solve is corona as fast as possible. But there are obviously limitations on how fast we can do it. That is the second thing. and then to stall the political threats to India, at least for some time, and then to meet them at a time which is more opportune to India and which is more favorable to India. So these are, in a nutshell, a few of my musings on the happenings in the Indian economy. I'm sure you will have a lot more to discuss, and I will be also joining whenever possible as a participant in your deliberations. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rajesh Parchure, for giving us the opening remark for the session. Now I introduce speaker, Madam Sangeeta Shroff. It's my pleasure to introduce keynote speaker, Professor Sangeeta Shroff. She has obtained her PhD in economics from Gokhale Institute. Currently, she is working as a professor and officer in charge of Agri-Economic Research Center (AERC) for Maharashtra at Gokhale Institute of Politics Economics, sponsored by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Government of India. Madam has worked on 35 research projects sponsored by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Government of India, Government of Maharashtra, Confederation of Indian Industry (CII), World Bank, etc. Professor Sangeeta Shroff has published more than 50 research articles in the field of agriculture economics. She has participated around 90 academic activities at the national level as well as international level, including conferences, seminar, workshop, etc. Professor Sangeeta Shroff was a member of working group on decentralized planning in agriculture in the context of 12th Five-Year Plan, 2012-17, Planning Commission, Government of India. She has done extensive work in diverse areas of the agriculture economics and has made important contribution on the issue to be addressed by the policy. Professor Sangeeta Shroff also teaches at the postgraduate level students, guiding PhD scholars, and known to be agriculture experts. So with this, now I will hand over the session to Ashish Kulkarni sir, who is a moderator for today's event. Dr. Ashish Kulkarni sir is a faculty of Gokhale Institute of Politics Economics. About him, he is a well-known academician. His experience ranging from corporate life to the academics. So now I request Dr. Ashish Kulkarni sir to take over the session. To take forward the session. Thank you.
So as I was saying, we're all eager to listen to Dr. Sangeeta Shroff. She'll be starting the presentation now. It'll last for around 40 to 45 minutes. Little bit up and down. That depends upon a whole variety of factors. At the end of which we will take questions. Couple of requests. 1, please don't share your own screen. 2, please mute yourself. And 3, whatever questions you want to ask, please use the chat window. I will filter those questions and ask Dr. Shroff to respond at the end of her talk. So without further ado, Dr. Shroff, over to you.
Good morning, all my viewers. At the very outset, let me thank Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, the director and the registrar, for giving me this opportunity to talk, to be the opening batsman of this webinar series. I also thank my colleagues, Dr. Pranav Raj and Dr. Ashish Kulkarni, for making this happen. Dr. Bhupesh, who's been very excited and really done a lot of coordination work, and all my colleagues in the institute. So without saying anything further, I'd like to present. Okay. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, before I begin my presentation, a small backdrop about Corona. The backdrop may not be required because all of us know a lot about Corona by now, but just a minute or two. In December 2019, there was a new novel coronavirus in Wuhan, China. And the virus is so very infectious that within a few months, it impacted 200 countries, and therefore it became global in nature. And in order to stop this infectious cycle, a lockdown was declared by a large number of countries in order to maintain social distancing. India declared the first lockdown on 24th March 2020. Since then, we've been having continuous lockdowns. Presently, we are in lockdown 5 and unlock 1. So what was the immediate impact of the lockdown? Professor Parchure has already given a very detailed background about the economy and all the three kind of different problems that the economy is facing. Even before Corona, we are talking about decline in growth rates, recession. So Corona has only added fuel to the fire, and of course our international relations with the border countries. The growth rate is going to further decline. There is loss of jobs because of total lockdown, and the migrant laborers have begun to return to the hinterland. This is a kind of an immediate impact of the lockdown. So although we've had a lockdown, which has been to a large extent almost total, obviously there have to be certain exempt categories for essential services like pharma and some more. Agriculture is obviously an essential service and therefore was in the exempt category. So soon after the government announced lockdown, it immediately announced the exempt categories, of which agriculture was one such sector. So what was allowed under agriculture? Farming operations have been allowed to be continued, the marketing of agro-produce, procurement at minimum support price, harvesting, provision of inputs and logistics, and sowing of crops. So what was the immediate impact of the COVID-19 situation? Because everybody knew there's going to be a lockdown. The lockdown was already announced. There was a short notice given. So the lockdown announcement caused panic purchase of essentials in more than the required quantities. Everybody was doing panic purchases because they didn't know when the commodity would be available again. There were pictures on the media showing empty shelves in all the malls. And naturally this panic buying, and people bought more than what was required. It led to an immediate rise in prices. Pulses prices shot up to 160, 180 per kg. And even other essentials were not available or the prices shot up. But gradually, the situation began to ease and supplies of food grains, fruits, vegetables were readily available. But although the supplies have reached the urban consumers, the farmers have suffered severe hardships. So what are the issues in the farm sector? The first, as we all know, that there is severe shortage of labor. The labor was reluctant to work because they had fear of catching corona. Secondly, social distancing norms had to be maintained. So a particular, say for packaging or grading or even harvesting, if a farmer required 5 laborers in order to maintain social distancing, he could keep only 2. This led to a great shortage of labor and they were not easily available. The farm produce could not be easily transported and there were constraints with respect to availability of storage, shortages of cold storage and other logistics. Now regarding shortages of cold storage and other logistics, this is actually a chronic problem with Indian agriculture. The situation was only accentuated with COVID, but we've always been talking about improving our logistics and other such supply chain needs to be improved. But the problem became very severe during this since March lockdown. So what about the agriculture and allied sector, which is the crux of this presentation? The agriculture and allied sector has suffered from a major bottlenecks. Now in the agricultural sector, it was notably the horticulture and the allied sector which were adversely impacted because they are highly perishable. Food grains have a longer shelf life and procured under minimum support price. So the farmers do have some kind of a support, but horticulture is highly perishable, including meat, fish, eggs, and other such commodities. So they had faced a major setback in the COVID crisis. Rabi wheat harvested was facilitated by mechanization, and sowing of summer crops was undertaken in the agricultural sector. Now, as I mentioned, that the horticulture sector was the main sector which was negatively impacted because being perishable. But fruits and vegetables are considered to be high value crop. While horticulture crops occupy 8% of area, they contribute to about 26% of the value of output from agriculture. In case of food grains, that is cereals, pulses, they occupy 50% of the area, but they contribute to about 26-27% of the value of output. In contrast, the horticulture sector, which has only 8% area, contributes to 26% of the value of output. And hence we say it's a high value crop. The returns are high, the farmers get high returns in a short period of time, and the produce is also exported. We can capitalize on export markets. Now, there are a large number of losses to the horticultural sector due to several factors. harvesting bottlenecks as labor was not easily available, the point which we all know. Even if the crop was harvested, there was difficulty in getting transport. There was a huge increase in the cost of transport. For example, if a truck had to travel from Varanasi to Delhi, if it originally costed 35,000 rupees, the truck, under COVID circumstances in March, April, it was costing 65,000 rupees. So the prices of transport had almost doubled and there was severe shortage. The contractors who normally pick up the produce did not make an entry into the farms. Normally the farmers sell the entire land holding of the produce to the contractors who harvest the produce and take it. But this time the contractors did not enter the fields to pick up the produce. The supplies were choked up in the fields, leading to crash in farm gate prices. And by and large, the farmers could not even recover their cost of production. And this is obviously going to create a burden on the loan repayment. So what were the economic losses due to COVID-19 for selected fruits? I have just done some rough estimates for selected fruits. There are a large number of fruits, large number of vegetables, all of which suffered a setback due to the demand shock and perishable nature. But for some major fruits, I have done some calculations, which I'm trying to share with you. Some of the calculations I've done myself and some I have borrowed from other sources. Now, as we know, watermelon has a huge summer demand and it was ready for harvest. Watermelon goes with summer and the farmers grow this crop in the hope of getting high returns. While a farmer normally earns rupees 4.5 lakh per hectare by cultivating watermelons, in 2020 season, post-lockdown, the earning was just 80,000 per hectare. So where is 4.5 lakh per hectare and where is 80,000 per hectare? We could see the difference in what the farmer got and what he expected. So if I take into consideration the area under watermelon, we get a loss of about 3,000 crore only for a small crop like watermelon, which has just 50,000 hectares under cultivation. Then we have the next crop, which also is a summer crop and goes well with the summer season. That is musk melon. And while the expected price was rupees 35 per kg, the farmer received just rupees 15 per kg. Total loss to this musk melon sector was 2,500 crores. Then the grape season. By and large, the grape season was already complete because the lockdown started in March. The grapes are beginning to harvest in January. So January, February, early March, a lot of grapes were harvested, sold, exported. So, but yet when the lockdown was announced, about 30% of the crop was still on the field and the prices crashed from say rupees 110 per kg to rupees 40 per kg or even less. There were instances when the farmers were getting even rupees 10 and rupees 20 per kg. Exporters suffered huge losses because all the export consignments were not complete. Only 50% of the total export was exported. Many consignments were not undertaken. Loss of grape sector was something like 5,000 crore. And the prices had crashed to such low levels, as I mentioned, even to 10 rupees and 20 rupees kg, that the farmers did not want to make distress sales and they preferred to use the crop for raisins. Then we next move on. The strawberry, a soft crop, highly perishable, is grown in the western belt of Maharashtra, Mahabaleshwar, Panchgani, Vai, around 4,000 acres. The peak sales of this crop are mainly in April and May. There's also a huge value addition of this crop, but the stocks piled up due to lockdown and the prices crashed by about 40%. The loss was around 15 to 20 crores. The crop was not harvested in some parts of the belt and suffered a setback because, as we know, strawberry ice cream and other strawberry products are a part of summer, and this had a real major setback. The local purchasers in the western belt, we have a number of local purchasers like Mapro, Mala, but they could purchase only limited stocks because they had limited stocking capacity, insufficient capacity of cold chain. So therefore, the other dealers, the other purchasers from other states could not come to the western belt to purchase. The produce could not be transported to Bangalore, Delhi, Pune, Mumbai, and so there were huge unsold stocks and the prices crashed. Next we come to mango, the king of fruits, which occupies 35% area under fruit crop. Mango is a major fruit crop occupying 35% area under fruit crops. The mango export suffered a huge setback because we export mangoes to US, Europe, many Western countries, and the exporters make a good profit. But this time this could not happen. Some consignments went by ship to Gulf countries. Secondly, mangoes also processed. We have mango pulp and other such products, but the processing factories were not operating. And therefore, the processing factories which normally purchase the waste of the second grade fruit, they could not purchase it and it was wasted. So they also suffered setbacks. Marketing boards, however, they made considerable efforts as the season began to progress. The marketing boards made aggressive efforts to smoothen the supply chain, which greatly eased the situation. Bulk orders were made by housing societies and the farmers arranged to supply them. So therefore, to a large extent, the situation with respect to mango was salvaged, although we could not capitalize on our exports. But still, the supply chain became more agile as the season progressed, and to some extent, the mango crop was saved. When it comes to floriculture, it was a very big disaster. There was a demand shock in domestic as well as export market. Obviously, nobody would look at flowers when the coronavirus and the lockdown had such a big impact. So floriculture suffered from a huge demand shock. In the export market, the loss was estimated to be 150 crore, and in the domestic market, something like rupees 10 lakh per day. The flowers were uprooted rather than harvested. And I think the marigold industry was totally destroyed. The farmers expect to earn huge sums of money due to festival season, due to wedding season in April, May. But the flowers were totally uprooted and unfortunately they were not harvested. When it comes to the allied sector, the meat, fish and eggs, the monthly loss to the fisheries sector was estimated at 7,000 crore. 4,000 crore lost in export of fish. Export of buffalo meat was badly hit. And as you all know, there were false rumors in the social media in February, March that the poultry birds are vectors of coronavirus. There was a fall in demand, huge supply glut. It was very unfortunate to see the scenes that were shown in the media about how the chicks were destroyed, poultry farms were destroyed. The birds were sold for rupees 10 to rupees 30 per kg. And while the cost of production was rupees 80 per kg. The eggs were sold at half the cost of production, while the cost of producing one egg is 4 rupees. They were being sold for 2 rupees immediately after the post-lockdown situation. Many chicken farms were destroyed, and the loss to the poultry sector between February to April 2020 was estimated to be 22,500. This was the estimate by the Poultry Federation. Then coming to dairy, the immediate impact was decline in the milk, in the price of milk by about 30%. We all know that hotels are closed, tea stalls, so there's going to be a huge fall in demand for milk, and also there's low value addition because sweet meat shops are not operating. So obviously a big fall in demand. And again, as soon as the lockdown was announced, there were pictures of milk being thrown, destroyed. There was no procurement, but gradually the government intervened and directed the cooperatives to procure milk, and this brought some kind of a stability to the milk sector. Milk was converted to skimmed milk powder for future consumption and export. But then again, this has brought about a fall in the price of skimmed milk powder, like say from rupees 300 kg, rupees 310 per kg to 230 rupees per kg. The price of skimmed milk powder has also fallen in the export market, but probably in the future it can still be used. Now, from the whatever losses I have shown, there are certain issues, it gives rise to certain issues, and there are certain lessons to learn. What are the main issues? The farm gate prices collapsed, huge wastages of the crops as well as value addition constraints, fragmented supply chain and poor infrastructure in the form of adequate cold storage and other logistics. As I earlier mentioned, this supply chain has been poor as a routine for Indian agriculture. It is not new to COVID, only the need was felt more in the post-lockdown period. And this has not happened immediately. We cannot increase our cold storage, but this is a pressing need of the hour. The Apple trucks which were arriving from Kashmir to Delhi had no buyers. Absence of cold storage and stocks went rotten. Similar experience with strawberries. So what are some of the lessons that we have to learn? We have to, because of labor shortage, we have to mechanize our agricultural operations to deal with this labor shortage. And agro-processing is also very important. Like in my previous slides, I showed that at least a large part of the milk could be converted to skimmed milk powder and therefore be saved. Maybe we'll have more raisins because the leftover grapes, instead of being sold at rock bottom prices, they can be used for agro-processing. So obviously the COVID crisis has also given rise to some opportunities. We've already been moving in this direction even before. One such opportunity is the farmer producer companies, which have been established in the recent past. In fact, in our 2019-20 budget, the government gave a lot of thrust to promoting farmer producers companies, as they can play an important role to bridge the gap between the rural farmers and urban consumers. Now, I've just given an example of a very prominent and successful farmer producer company based in Nasik called Sahyadri Farms. It has a membership of more than 8,000 farmers. It tapped the urban consumers through e-commerce, social media, mobile apps, and websites. A large number of aggregators use this. I've given the example of Sahyadri Farms. There was total coordination with all stakeholders. The Sahyadri Farm had some idea on the availability of fruits, vegetables from its member farmers, and then they could accordingly take orders. So they succeeded in giving fresh produce with proper grading and packaging to 57,000 urban consumers with minimum contact. Online payment was made by customers. Economies of scale were achieved through an efficient supply chain, and transaction costs were reduced. Benefit to producer and consumer was therefore achieved, and supply-demand asymmetry issues were resolved. Further, the Sahyadri Farms has also gone into backward and forward linkage. It has leveraged itself in the total value chain. It provides back-end support to farmers through advisory services and supply of inputs. It undertakes agro-processing activities such as tomato ketchup. Now, tomato is also a highly perishable crop. We keep hearing about onions, which are highly perishable because onions are politically sensitive. Actually, tomatoes also have a sad stories like onion, but they don't get so much of importance in the media because perhaps they're not as politically sensitive as onion. But I'm sure everybody has seen tomatoes being piled up and thrown in while you drive through highways, and farmers often don't harvest the stock of tomatoes. They are sold for 2 rupees and 3 rupees a kg. So the best way to solve this problem is through making tomato puree and tomato ketchup. Now, a firm like Sahyadri undertakes processing activities and makes tomato ketchup for even big companies like Kisan. So this is the best way to deal with a supply glut. Leading exporters of grapes and other agricultural produce, Sahyadri has almost 17 to 20% share in exports of grapes. And so what we are trying to say is that farmer producer companies like Sahyadri Farms must be promoted. The government is strongly promoting FPCs. In fact, in India, I was just looking, we have about 7,000 odd farmer producers companies. All are not successful. There are a lot of problems with them. They suffer from short of capital and other, they need some kind of technical training. Some are successful, but the government is not complacent about it. The government is aware that farmer producers companies should be promoted, and let us hope there are many more successful stories like Sahyadri to help salvage the COVID-like situation. Now, the next issue is that self-sufficiency is important. COVID-19-like situations may not provide the comfort of globalization, and there is need for self-sufficiency, especially for important crops. Now, I mean, we know that India is experiencing increasing per capita incomes. Once our demand for, say, cereals is met, we move on to demand for edible oils and pulses. There is a huge increasing demand for edibles, oils and pulses, but India imports 60% of edible oil. We are not at all self-sufficient in producing edible oil. Malaysia and Indonesia are just around the corner. We import hugely from them. As long as they are nearby and the imports are smooth sailing, it's fine. But when we have situations like COVID-19, or even when we have problems with with border disputes and any other issues with international relations, edible oil imports can be stopped at any point of time. So therefore, it's important to be self-sufficient during critical times like COVID, at least for important crops like edible oil. Similar with respect to pulses. Few years ago, we had a huge shortage in the production of pulses. Prices reached to very high levels. Again, there is a, I mean, you know, if there's a shortage of pulses, it's definitely going to give a lot of importance. I mean, a lot of problems for the Indian consumers because the demand is increasing. And India often meets the shortfalls through imports from many countries. But in order to meet this demand, we have been trying to increase the production by increasing area. But what actually needs to be done is that we should try to increase production not by increasing area, but by increasing our productivity levels and become self-sufficient by increasing productivity. In order to strengthen this point, I was just looking at the productivity of many major crops like rice, maize, pulses, like tur, soya bean, groundnut. What is the international average yield of these crops and what is the average yield in India? One. And the second is within India, within states, there are differences in yield. Some states have very high yield and some states have low. Quite often the difference in yield is due to differences in irrigation facilities. Like Punjab and Haryana have irrigation facilities almost 99-98%. So therefore the yield is higher. Other states like Maharashtra hardly have any irrigation. Our yield is lower. Besides that, even technology. But there is, look, the difference between the red and the blue shows the world average and India. And within India also, there's a lot of intrastate differentials. So there is a huge scope. For example, in the case of tur, our average yield is 646 kg per hectare, whereas in the world, it is something like 829 and the world's highest is 1612. So we are less than the world's highest average. This shows there's a lot of potential to increase the yield and we must try to increase production by increasing yield rather than increasing area. Now, what are the challenges that we are facing? As I already meant, there is a huge potential to increase productivity levels through technology and also by improving irrigation, mainly through watershed facilities, trying to harvest the rainwater. If we have an increase in productivity, more can be grown on less land, and therefore maybe land can also be released for other uses. Increased production can be used for agro-processing, and such units can be established in rural areas, thus generating employment and reducing distress migration. Again, when I talk about agro-processing, let me go back to giving the example of onion, because as I mentioned, it's politically sensitive and we all know that the price goes up to 90 rupees. There's a huge hue and cry in the media and then it's a problem. Then what happens when the price goes up to 90 rupees? The farmers bring in more area under the crop. Then there's more supply. The price goes down to 2 rupees, 3 rupees. So of course we have to bring in a balance between the supply and demand. But when there is a glut in the market, it would be a good idea to bring about dehydration of onions, so that at least when the price goes up to 90, some of the demand can be met by dehydrated onions. Normally this dehydrated onions is used mostly for the army, navy, and these kind of uses. Ordinary consumers like you and me don't like to use this product, but maybe we should, so that we can sort out this rising price in the lean period. So this is just one example. So the farmers would not get 2 and 3 rupees per kg. And the prices would be able to come down at least much above the cost of production. The cost of production of onion is something like 8 rupees a kg. At least we should try to maintain a price of 15, 16 rupees a kg of onion. So agro-processing is one way of trying to generating employment, reducing, reduce distress migration, and also try to bring about, sort out the lean season demand. The next step is export of agricultural produce, which is often subject to non-tariff barriers as developed countries impose stringent quality norms. We know that with globalization, the tariffs are, the non-tariff barriers are there for agriculture. Otherwise, we only can impose tariffs. But now for agriculture, non-tariff barriers are there due to quality controls. These norms are likely to become more challenging in the post-COVID-19 scenario, and the country must therefore be prepared to meet these norms. So obviously there are a large number of issues. These issues are not only in the post-lockdown period and essentially due to COVID-19, they are chronic problems in the agricultural sector, and the government had already taken care of these, how to sort out these issues much before the lockdown. There is intervention by the government to provide relief to the agricultural sector, which comprises of 14.5 crore farm households, and we also have 14 crore agricultural laborers. You know, agriculture is about 42% of our workforce, and 85% are small and marginal farmers. So in order to help the agricultural economy and also the present situation, there are three kinds of support: the income support, the credit support, and agri reforms. So what is the income support? This was already before the COVID-19 situation. Direct cash transfer under PM Kisan. The government had announced in its last budget that every farmer, the 14.5 crore households, 85% of them who are small and marginal, would be getting 6,000 rupees per annum. Then Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which further provided for vulnerable section in the form of income support, additional food grains, and the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which aims at creating public works and puts income in the hands of the weaker section. Now, this is like the kind of income support. Professor Parchure in his opening remark already touched upon the fiscal part of the 20 lakh crore package. And he said that the income, when there is a crisis, you have to stimulate demand. And to stimulate demand, you need to put cash in the hands of the poor. So the factors which I talked about, the points which I raised, PM Kisan, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, they are putting money in the hands of farmers, but apparently it is not enough, I suppose, to generate enough demand. But I suppose the government has to again deal, like under income support of the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, I believe that 80 crore poor households have been given income. So I suppose the government also has its constraints with such a huge population. But nevertheless, I suppose they have done something. Of course, more may be needed on the fiscal front. Then I talked about additional food grains. Fortunately, when the lockdown was announced, the government already had 57 million tons of food grains. In fact, the government said that we have so much of food grains that we could use some of it to even make alcohol. So the food security part was quite secure with sufficient food grains to give. We are already giving food under the public distribution system to the vulnerable section, but more additional food grains are given in this lockdown situation. And we had a stock, luckily an opening stock of about 57 million tons. Then obviously there is no employment in the country. So we have to have these, under the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, we have to create public works, and the government increased the budget under NREGA from 40,000 crore, additional 60,000 crore have been budgeted for this scheme, so that some money would go in the hands of the weaker section. Work would be created, money, and that would again inject demand in the economy and try to kickstart the economy. So this is the income support. Then we are moving on to the Rabi wheat. So I talked in detail about the horticulture sector, how it was negatively impacted, the allied sector, the meat, fish, eggs, floriculture, because they are highly perishable. But when it comes to the main Kharif and Rabi crops, the wheat is a Rabi crop and rice is largely a Kharif crop, because they are not so perishable. To some extent, they could be saved. The government also had time to look into the situation and make necessary arrangements. So we had a record harvest of little more than 100 million tons of wheat. In fact, our production of wheat this April 2020 is about 11 million tons more than the average. Out of the about say 110 million tons of wheat, 38 million tons of wheat have been procured under the for the public distribution system at minimum support price. The minimum support price has been raised to something like 1900 rupees per quintal. So almost 1/3 of our wheat crop has been purchased. The purchase centers increased by 47%. So more and more purchase centers were created all over the country. 48 lakh farmers could sell their crop under minimum support prices, and they received the minimum support price. So the reports say that sanitization was done and social distancing was maintained. All the SOP procedures were maintained. And to add to this, even the Indian Railways played a good role in to ease the transport, to see that the wheat was distributed from the procurement centers to the various states so that they could further distribute under public distribution system and for the additional food grains. So that was about the wheat crop, which is the main Rabi crop. We are right now in June 2020. So the Kharif sowing has started, and again paddy is an important Kharif crop, and it is very labor intensive because we do a lot of transplanting of paddy. States like Punjab, they have given 50% subsidy for mechanical direct seeding of the paddy. This method requires less irrigation, and note I said mechanical direct seeding, which means that now we have labor shortage, huge. Paddy is a very labor intensive crop, and we know that we are in a situation where there is huge labor shortage. So we have to resort to mechanization. Even though we call ourselves a labor surplus country, when there is a crisis, the labor is not available. So 50% subsidy for mechanical direct seeding of paddy. That is going to help us sort out the labor shortage situation. Then there has been increased offtake of fertilizers as compared to 2019, almost 49% increase in offtake of fertilizers. And the media reports have said that there is an increase in area under cotton, because when we are now in the Kharif season, the farmers are ready to sow the Kharif crop. The exact area under different Kharif crops would be known only by end of July, August. Right now the sowing season has just started. And paddy is the main crop, but even cotton is a very important crop besides oil seeds. I understand that a lot of area is going under cotton. The reason why I've written the word caution in brackets is because one reason why the farmers, I mean, this is just my viewpoint, I'm not sure how right I am, and we have to wait and watch. The one reason why the farmers may have increased area under cotton is because, again, the government has increased the minimum support prices. I think it's something like 7,000 odd per quintal. So when the farmers see an increase in MSP, obviously there is a supply response of farmers to price, and they allocate more area to cotton. So that could be one reason why the farmers are putting more area under cotton. But the reason why I use the word caution is because when you increase area, the supply is going to increase. Again, there may be a supply glut, the prices may fall. And again, once more, I'm saying that why have I said the word caution is because we are also major exporters of cotton. And Professor Parchure already mentioned about what kind of relationship we are having with our neighbors. We are major exporters of cotton to China. We know that China is, supporting, giving textiles to the world. They are the factory of the world as far as textiles is concerned. And they therefore do not have enough cotton themselves. And India is a major exporter of cotton to China. And today, with the kind of situations that we have, we may not be in a position to export cotton to China, or suddenly China will increase its import tariff, and then we will be saddled with stocks in India, the prices will crash, and very often suicide among farmers is, in the cotton growing belt. Of course, this is what I'm apprehending. It has to be a wait and watch situation. It's too early to say, we are only in June. But what I'm trying to say is that when we talk about exports, it's not only the COVID factor which is going to be a detrimental to export, but also the international relations and the kind of international relations that we're having with our neighbors. We have to look at it with caution. So quite often, as we find that the area is increasing under the crops, we have to give a signal to the farmers to stop sowing this crop, because it might lead to an supply glut in the market. And therefore, they have to try to switch over to some other crop. Okay. Going to credit support, that is the second part of the intervention with the government. We already know that horticulture had made huge losses. The farmers have taken loans to cultivate the crops. Obviously, they're not going to be in a position to repay the loan. So RBI has announced a moratorium for term and crop loans for 3 months. Then there is interest subvention. The interest rate has been reduced. And for farmers who repay timely, even further 1% or 2% subvention in interest. Additional support given through NABARD, and also support is given through Kisan Credit Card. Something like 2 lakh crore more is going to be given to the farmers as credit through Kisan Credit Card. Then the third and final is the agri reforms. Now, agri reforms is again a huge topic for discussion. I've just done it in one slide. Maybe sometime in future we can discuss this topic again. So a package has been announced for strengthening infrastructure, logistics, and capacity building. All along in my presentation, I mentioned that we are heavily starved for infrastructure in the agricultural sector, and probably something like 1 lakh crore is going to be used for strengthening the infrastructure, logistics, and capacity building. And then micro food enterprises are going to be promoted. And okay, the 3 ordinances have been issued. Now, agriculture is the state subject, but these ordinances have come out from the center. Probably they could use some kind of a constitutional rule and come out with, the centers come out with these ordinances, which says that barrier-free trade, and they want to promote one India, one market. So to keep in line with this, the following ordinances were issued. The first and foremost is the Essential Commodity Act 1955 has been amended so that major crops are free from excessive regulations and stock limits. Now, when I said major crops, I mean cereals, pulses, and notably onion and potato. Now, first of all, I have 2 things to say on this issue. Essential Commodity Act 1955. So as we can see, 1955 means it's an archaic law. This law or this act was passed just after independence because we were a food shortage economy. We had inherited the Bengal famine, and obviously there was severe food shortage. So in order to see that the stocks, there was no excessive stocking, no excessive hoarding, this law was implemented. But today, I think it has outlived its utility. And since long, many economists have been pressurizing the government that we should do away with this act. As I said, even onion and potato are now going to be freed from excessive regulations. Again, I go back to the usual point that sometimes the price of onion goes up to 90 rupees per kg. And then we have a huge team going from Delhi to Lasalgaon. Lasalgaon in Nasik is one of the biggest onion markets in Asia. And huge number of trading goes on over there. And you have, when the price goes up to 90, 100 rupees, a team will visit from Delhi to Lasalgaon to see what are the stocks being held with the traders. Then many economists will be called. Suddenly the government will ask for more imports to come. So these kind of issues crop up. But even the traders, I mean, they are stocking from the point of view of meeting the lean season requirements, and they have built on warehouses with the purpose of storing. So if there are always going to be constraints on them, obviously they will hesitate to stock produce. Similar thing happens with respect to potatoes. I remember a few years ago, the price of potato went up, and potatoes again, very sensitive commodity in West Bengal. Then the chief minister would say, the traders, you should remove your stocks from the cold storage to ease out the price. So these kind of things keep happening. But to some extent, I mean, again, it's my personal view, it may not be very fair to the traders. So therefore, this Essential Commodity Act, it has to be freed from excessive regulations. And I think it's a good move on the part of the government. So this is the point number 1. Point number 2 is the monopoly of the Agricultural Produce Market Committee Act has been removed. Again, this act was enacted, I mean, agriculture is a state subject, and these acts have been enacted post-independence in the 1950s. Each state had its own Agricultural Produce Market Committee Act, under which it was compulsory for every producer to sell his produce only in the APMC. And as I've used the word monopoly, they were more or less a monopoly in the purchase of agricultural produce. Now, by enacting this act of free trade, one of the second ordinance, besides the market yard, any place can be called a market, the warehouses, and even when produce moves from one state to the other, one market to other, there are problems of octroi and other issues. So maybe now the purpose of this ordinance is to make one India, one market and provide barrier-free trade. The nitty-gritty of this has to be yet worked out, I suppose, but the purpose is to give agricultural produce more markets, because today we are talking so much about price crash, price fall, and the issue initially we had very low production and productivity, but today we are having a supply glut. Despite having low productivity, we still have a supply glut. So if the productivity increases, the supply glut is going to increase even further. So we have to take care of the marketing front and therefore provide more markets. And this second number ordinance is given more freedom to sell produce to the farmers. And the third ordinance is with respect to contract farming to facilitate it. Just like the minimum support price is a risk mitigating measure, So is contract farming, because the farmer can tie up with his contractor regarding the price. So he's got an assured price. He fixes up the price before. The company with which he has a contract, they provide him with inputs, the know-how, and in the end, they buy back the produce. So therefore, the farmer is assured of some kind of a price, and therefore, again, it's one more risk mitigating measure. So the government has come out with these three ordinances in the hope of giving the farmer a better price, more markets, more competition, better price discovery. So finally, I say that COVID-19 has given opportunities to agriculture. COVID-19 will play an important role in the transition of domestic and global agriculture. Digital and internet economy will find new takers, and agricultural sector has an opportunity to run the race. Now we know we are moving towards an internet economy, and even agriculture requires the need of internet. Today we have 68 crore internet users. The growth rate has been quite high. It is expected that it will go up to 90 crores in the near future. And therefore, this will help to promote the agricultural sector and find better markets, provide better services for the agricultural sector. Talking about markets, there is one more, that is a unified agricultural market is created, which can be accessed online. Electronic trading leads to real price discovery and reduced transaction costs. So again, when we talk about electronic trading, it can take care of the problem of social distancing. And I was listening to a speech on electronic trading. Suddenly after COVID-19 situation, after lockdown, at least 400 new traders got in touch with this, came to new portals and tried electronic trading. So number of traders on electronic trading platform increased suddenly, but it has a long way to go. This is one of the flagship programs of our Prime Minister and of our government of India, that they want to promote electronic trading, but it remains a huge challenge. One of the major challenges of electronic trading is assaying, that is the quality check of the produce. Because our agricultural produce is not homogeneous, and when a trader or a commission agent buys a produce, he would like to touch and feel the produce. This is not possible when you do online buying. Let me just give an example, let us say, of apples. In India, when we go to buy apples, our Indian apples, although there's a huge increase in production and maybe the quality is improving, we find that they are of different shapes, sizes, color, pink, red, green, different colors. But when we look at the our malls, which are full of even imported apples, like say from Fiji or the Washington apples, they are absolutely homogeneous. Any number of the produce looks absolutely identical and homogeneous. So therefore, the buyer knows exactly what he's buying. But in India, when he does online trade, he's not confident about what produce is going to actually reach him, what is going to be the real physical delivery. And this has come as a major challenge, assaying, and we have a long way to go as far as this is concerned. And of course, the farmers need to access internet, get used to this kind of new technology. And when this happens, and hope it happens, definitely there'll be one unified agricultural marketing. Going back to the point, it is a dream of the government of India to have a unified agricultural marketing. As I mentioned, there are a lot of teething problems, mainly with getting used to the internet, digital economy, and assaying. These are two major challenges, but we hope that it will happen really, and very soon India will, electronic trading would really happen. Then the next point is agri-tech startups with a technology integrated platform are springing up, which can be a game changer for Indian agriculture. Regarding this, I could say that we know that United States is also becoming very stringent in its policy for inviting our skilled workforce. So a large number of, this may help India to deal with the problem of brain drain. We have a large number of IIT, IIMs, who are, and not, even other skilled workers and a lot of talent, who are children of farmers, and they have come up the hard way, and they have come up with a large number of agri-tech startups. You can see a large number of such if you Google, and they would like to contribute to the agricultural economy, large number of apps providing advisory services to the farmers, integrating, aggregating the produce. So, and even various kinds of agro advisory services to farmers can be provided. So agri-tech startups can be a great game changer for the Indian agriculture. We have a huge talent, and I'm sure it's going to get tapped in the near future. Then the scale of agro-processing can be increased to reduce wastage, satisfy lean season demand, and generate employment. I've already talked about agro-processing, but that is needed. And today, I mean, it will definitely help to prevent distress migration. So as the above changes begin to happen, Indian agriculture will not only be transformed, but serve as a catalyst of growth for other sectors of the economy, and there will be overall growth of the economy. So when the agriculture and the rural sector does well, obviously there's going to be money in the hands of farmers. As we know, we need money, we need cash to kickstart the economy. The rural sector is a large part of the economy. So when the agriculture sector gets cash, they will generate a demand for industrial goods, the demand for TV, refrigerator, mobile phones, and all industrial FMCGs would increase. Then the industrial sector would get a boost. Accordingly, the tertiary sector would get a boom, the service sector would come to play, and all sectors of the economy would boom. So the agricultural sector would be a catalyst of growth for other sectors of the economy, and there will be an overall growth of the economy. So I think that COVID-19 has given opportunities to the agricultural sector, at least to expedite many. The reforms have already been in place. They have been a bit slow, perhaps. The COVID-19 has given an opportunity to rapidly bring about the changes, and we hope that when this happens, Indian agriculture can get transformed and we can slightly come out of the recession and move to better days. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Dr. Sangeeta Shroff, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. Before I actually thank her, I need to thank both Pranav and Bhupesh, because I got to attend a talk by Dr. Sangeeta Shroff after nearly a decade and a half. And it was as well formed as it used to be all those many years ago. So thank you to all three of you. One minor complaint on my part is I wish I had the luxury of asking questions, because as I'm sure everybody else also many more questions than I'm also had quite a few questions. There have been so many questions that all of you have asked that I'm going to have to put it in between the questions that have already been shared on the chat window. So I'll try and go through this as far as possible chronologically, but also bunch together some questions where necessary. Let me begin with the very first one that was asked, and this was asked by Rahul, and I'm going to combine some of the questions that Rahul has asked over the course of the talk. The first question was about agricultural inputs that need to be provided by the government during the lockdown. And he actually went on and added to this question a little while later when he spoke about specifically urea and the need to use urea fertilizers more intensively, especially during the latter stage of the crop cycle. So how can government help in terms of providing inputs like seed, like fertilizer for farmers during the COVID lockdown? Was his first question.
Hello, Rahul. Actually, I think in my presentation, I already mentioned that in the Kharif crop, the offtake of fertilizer is something like 49% more than what it was last year. And the government is very aware of, the need for purchase of inputs. And they've already said that, the railways are doing a good job, not only in transporting food grains for additional food grains and through the PDS, but also for providing inputs. And I've not really heard about any shortage of, inputs which have been, which has been facing the farmers, at least by and large. There may be some micro cases, but the overall picture, I'm not in the position to talk to farmers in any way, but the overall picture that I have observed is there has been a huge increase in fertilizers, including urea, as compared to last year. And one reason for this huge increase, as I mentioned, 49% more compared to last year, is that they're expecting a very good monsoons. So the farmers are naturally, buying more inputs. And I've not perceived any shortage of inputs. So that's what I can answer you right now.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. The second question that has been asked, and first of all, need to congratulate the user on a very original and somewhat funny name. The name is not Kalka Fresh. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly and also getting the joke at the same time. He has asked, or she has asked, 3 or 4 questions. I'm going to only use 2 of them right now. The first one was about the shortened supply chain for horticulture. So as a consequence of the coronavirus, Nordkalka Fish is saying there has been a dramatic shortening of the supply chain when it comes to horticulture, and that has, he argues or she argues, proven beneficial to the horticulturists themselves. So once the coronavirus crisis ends, might there be a way to make this more permanent, a shortened supply chain, in particular for horticulturists in the country? That's his first question.
No,
And
sorry, I didn't get, because she's confusing the suggestion and...
Right, so the question, insofar as I myself understand it, is earlier supply chains used to involve many more actors than has been the case during the crisis. How to make this more permanent is the first question. And the second question, which I liked in particular, is the hotel and the restaurant industry has been, as we all know, decimated because of the coronavirus crisis. In terms of input and output, the agricultural sector will supply a significant chunk of the hotel and restaurant industry's input. But given that this sector has been very badly hit, what kind of support, if at all, should be provided to the agricultural sector, particularly those who were dependent on this sector? Yeah, so ma'am, if you feel that you've already answered, please just let them know. Yes.
See,
regarding
shortened supply chain, that's the reason why I gave the example of Sayagri farms, because they have shortened supply chain and the government is much aware, because one of the main inefficiencies in Indian agriculture is the huge supply
chain, large number of intermediaries. So the agri-market reforms are already in place, like direct marketing. And even I gave the example of FPCs, because in Indian agriculture, we have 85% are small and marginal farmers. So we need aggregators who would pick up the produce from large number of small farmers, aggregate it, and then supply it to the consumers. This has already happened in COVID. Like, I mean, many of you may be living in large housing societies. And the produce, they have said that we will supply it to you, provided we have an order of 100 boxes or 200 boxes. So that is already, the supply chain has already been shortened. It was already happening, but COVID has just expedited the process. And regarding hotels and, I mean, see, it's not only the hotels and restaurants, and everybody has suffered in COVID, because under the lockdown, the economy is paralyzed. Even the industrial sector has suffered. When there has been a lot of wastage, but as I gave the example of milk and grapes, that they were converted to skimmed milk powder, or grapes have been converted to raisins. We have to do it in a short period of time. So we have to keep our infrastructure in place. To whatever infrastructure was there has been used, but we have to keep it in place so that we have to be prepared for exigencies like COVID.
I'm sorry about that. I'll repeat my question. So I'm going to combine a series of questions about labor as an input in agriculture. The first of which was asked by Kedar, a past student of the Gokhale Institute. His question was, once labor goes back to rural areas, and in some cases, of course, this has already happened, will this lead to an increase in agricultural production? Chandramouli follows up with a somewhat paradoxical question in response. He says, might it be the case that disguised unemployment, especially in rural areas, will go up as a consequence of many workers going back to the agricultural sector? And I'm sorry, I've forgotten who has asked this question, but the question is related to the two questions that I've already asked. Once farmers will see that there is a surge in the availability of labor in rural areas, then why do we need to provide subsidy for especially mechanized sowing for paddy? Will this not be mutually contradictory? The questions, in fact, show you the difficulty of policy and planning when it comes to agriculture. But ma'am, we would all be very interested in hearing your take.
Well, I mean, there are many contradictory things do happen. Now, regarding reverse migration of labor, well, labor has gone to the hinterland. Now, as I mentioned, that because of this, like Punjab, Punjab does not know that how much labor is going to come back. Gradually, the situation was eased out. So today, the picture is such that labor has started moving from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh to Punjab to help in rice plantation. It's happening, but Punjab is not aware that how much labor is going to come back. They have to be prepared for exigencies. So therefore, they gave 50% subsidy for direct seeding. So you have to have, I mean, the alternative repaired in place. So they could be, the labor could be unemployed if the mechanization has happened. Mechanization does bring about increase in productivity because it helps in timeliness of operations. It's more perfect, the work is done, it requires less supervision. But then, we've always had this argument about labor productivity, mechanization. We are a labor surplus country. Mechanization would definitely increase productivity. But then at the same time, you're going to say that now Punjab has used mechanization for harvesting and for sowing. So what do we do with the labor? But then what can you do? I mean, it's an exigency. The labor has to, I mean, the government has also taken care to give them food under PDS, additional food grains, some additional income. Some kind of mismatch is going to be there, but we have to work with it. So that is what I have to say. There is going to be disguised employment, but these are all chronic problems of the Indian agriculture. The answer is a kind of a holistic approach. It cannot, I mean, in this COVID-like situation, we have to be prepared for everything. We have to be prepared with mechanization. If there is labor is unemployed, we have to give unemployment subsidy to labor. We have to give them cash. We have to give them food. Arrangements have been made, but I mean, everything cannot be 100%. That's my answer.
Absolutely. One question that I want to once again combine across a series of different questions. There have been many questions about pricing. In particular, when it comes to pricing, differences in prices, both from a time perspective as well as a space perspective. And what I mean by that is at least time and space.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is at least a couple of people who have attended this seminar have asked about price differences of the same agricultural commodity, say for example, across metropolitan areas and smaller towns, but also across various parts of the country. But also, Sneha had a question about whether it is possible to introduce a price stabilization scheme. She said in particular for tomatoes and onion, but in general for many more agricultural commodities, both during and in the aftermath of the crisis.
Yeah, hello. Yes, of course. I mean, there is going to be a difference in time and space because after all, agriculture is all about peak season glut and lean season, the commodity is scarce. So obviously there's going to be a rise in price in lean season. There are so many ways to take care of this issue. One is already I said about agro-processing. See, agriculture is a biological industry. You cannot grow it throughout the year. If there is a shortage of an industrial product, maybe you can suddenly increase the supply if you have the machinery. But like you do rice sowing in June, it's harvested in November. So whatever is produced is produced. Suddenly there's an increase in demand. You can only increase the supply by importing. So we do, like when it comes to certain commodities like rice and wheat, we maintain a buffer stock there. That is most essential. See, we have to, rice and wheat, they take care of food security. So we do, the government maintains a buffer stock. We have public distribution system. Now, with respect to horticulture also, obviously, this is May and June is a peak season, April, May. The lean season demand has to be met through agro-processing. And obviously, the further the distance, the more is going to be the price. If your mangoes are exported to USA, long distance, you're going to, the price which a American consumer is going to pay for the Alfonso mango is going to be much less than what a farmer in the Konkan is going to pay. That's obviously going to happen. So, I mean, the main, and regarding price stabilization fund, price commodity fund, yes, that is a policy measure that you have to have good warehouses. That's again, these are all market reforms which have to be in place. Whatever can be stored, the government will take care of storing the essential commodities. The other traders would take care of storing other commodities like maybe lychees processed. I mean, there are other horticulture. You cannot expect the government to start storing, horticultural produce. It would only think of the government is going to provide you with essentials. So food grains are stored by the government, but other horticultural produce, they have to be processed and take care of lean season demand. And prices are obviously going to be different in the peak season and lean season. What do we mean by peak season? There's a glut in the market, excess supply, and price is going to crash. It's all about demand and supply. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Unfortunately, we have time for only one more question, but there have been a lot of questions which, ma'am, I'll spare you having to answer them because all of us at Gokhale Institute, I suspect, have the same answer to these sort of questions. Questions along the lines of your prediction for what agricultural growth is going to be in the coming year, or will there be inflation due to higher government spending in the agricultural sector, or when onion prices will rise. It's impossible to try and forecast or predict this right now. So I think it makes sense to say that God knows is the only correct answer. But the one question that I did want to ask you, and this is a question once again asked, if I remember correctly, by a past student of the Gokhale Institute, Atish Nikam. His question is about storage infrastructure and MSP support, especially during and the aftermath of the COVID crisis. What can the government do outside of what it has already done in terms of augmenting storage capacities and MSP? So as you might have heard ma'am say right now, every question has already been answered. But I think this is a question that was asked more than once. So if you could please just cover it.
Okay, now regarding growth rate, well, as I mentioned that the economy is paralyzed today. So like industry is almost shut down, but agriculture is functioning. So therefore, it is going to, I mean, we are going to have, what is going to be the growth rate? A large amount will be depending on how is going to be the rainfall. Because we are expecting good rainfall, but then again in agriculture, like it happened last year, like the Commissioner Agriculture said that within 2 days we were going to harvest the crop, and there was such a big cyclone and the crop was destroyed. Entire Goa, the rice was destroyed. In the entire Konkan, the rice was destroyed. So one is again the usual thing which we learn, that agriculture is a gamble of the monsoon. So a lot depends on the rain. And till today, we have only 45% under irrigation. And when I give an average of 45%, it is mostly concentrated in Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. States like Maharashtra have only 18% area under irrigation. I'm again giving an example. Let me say about soybean. Soybean is an important crop in Maharashtra. If the rain is good, we get a productivity of 1700 kg per hectare. If the rain is bad, we get a productivity of 300 kg per hectare. So where is 300 kg and where is 1700 kg? When the productivity is 300 kg per hectare, the farmers don't even harvest the crop because they feel that the labor cost is more than the value of the produce. So but a lot of it depends on monsoons, but the monsoons are expected to be good. God willing that everything goes well. The agricultural sector, I think, would do well. It probably do well than other sectors, but other sectors are going to face more impact of lockdown as compared to agriculture, because agriculture is an essential service and it's the agricultural operations are going on. So therefore, it's definitely going to do better than other sectors. And I think if the monsoons are good, we would do well. Already the Rabi crop has gone more than average. We have 11 million tons more of wheat harvested than the previous years. So and the government has procured 38 million tons of wheat. So we don't have to worry about food security from that point. Hopefully the rice, we had 57 million tons of rice already in store. So I don't think the food security problem would happen. But if we have unforeseen cyclones or some such thing, our grape crops gets destroyed often due to cyclones, our mango crop. But I'm still optimistic that agriculture would do well in 2021. Then obviously I mean, these are all shortcomings. I forgot about the storage infrastructure.
The question is about how storage facilities can be improved both during the coronavirus crisis, which might last for another year, 18 months, maybe more, and in the immediate aftermath as well.
Yes, but I think as far as the storage infrastructure is concerned, the government, like we've already procured 38 million tons of wheat and they have been properly stored. And the next was going to be rice. The government is now aware, I think is getting more active and because there was, at least I never heard of any great crisis when wheat procurement was taking place. And even the railways have been doing a good job in transporting the produce. I don't see, we do have a storage infrastructure, but hopefully the government there may be a crisis, but I don't think it will be a threat to food security. I can only say that we have to buck up on this direction. It's a challenge and we have to meet it. And we need private sector to come up in warehouses. And again, MSP, the government will procure it has to procure under MSP because it's one more fiscal support for the agricultural sector.
All right, fantastic. It's 1 minute beyond 1 p.m. So we are able to finish on time. Sangeeta ma'am, thank you so much for a fantastic talk. I'm sure everybody on the call will agree with me when I say that we've all learned a lot as a consequence of having attended this talk. There have been a series of questions throughout the presentation about e-certificates and about presentation, but I'm sure Pranav and Bhupesh will be following up with the presentation that we shared with everybody, and details about the upcoming talks will be also shared in short order. So once again, I would like to conclude by thanking everybody who made this talk happen, and in particular Dr. Sangeeta Shroff.
So
Thank you so much.
Once again congratulate all the participants and thank you so much for joining this session. Whatever the questions you have asked in the chat window, we will respond to these questions and get back to you by email. Thank you so much for joining the sessions. I also thank to all, we have people from across the states, like from Gujarat, from Tamil Nadu, from Punjab, from each and every place we have participated for this today's webinar. So now I conclude that the session is over, and please log out from this webinar. Thank you.